morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens as Camilla walked quietly along the stone path. Her heart was beating fast and she kept looking over her shoulder to make sure no one was following her. The palace was always busy with servants, guards, and officials, but today she needed to be alone. She had been planning this meeting for weeks. Every detail had to be perfect, because if anyone found out, it would destroy everything she had worked for. The royal family trusted her, and the public saw her as a devoted member of the monarchy. But behind all the formal dinners and public appearances, Camilla had a secret that could change everything. The man she was going to meet was not someone the palace would approve of. He was not wealthy, not famous, and definitely not someone who moved in royal circles. His name was David, and he worked as a photographer for a small London newspaper. They had met 6 months ago during a charity event where he was taking pictures for his paper. At first, their conversations were just friendly small talk. David was different from the people Camilla usually met. He was honest, funny, and he treated her like a normal person instead of someone special because of her title. When he looked at her, she felt like he saw the real woman behind all the royal duties and public expectations. Their friendship slowly grew into something deeper. They started meeting secretly in quiet cafes outside London, always careful to avoid places where photographers might see them. David would wear simple clothes and a baseball cap to blend in, while Camilla would dress down and wear sunglasses. These stolen moments became the highlight of her weeks. The garden meeting spot was behind the old greenhouse, hidden from the main palace windows. Camilla had discovered this place years ago when she needed somewhere quiet to think. Tall hedges surrounded a small bench, and the only way to reach it was through a narrow path that most people never noticed. As she reached the bench, her phone buzzed with a text message. "Running 5 minutes late, sorry. See you soon?" It was from David, and even this simple message made her smile. She sat down and tried to calm her nerves. Every time they met, she worried it might be the last time. The risk was enormous. If anyone in the palace found out about their relationship, it would create a scandal that could damage the entire royal family. The newspapers would have a field day, and the public would lose trust in the monarchy. But despite all these dangers, Camilla could not stop herself from seeing David. She heard footsteps on the gravel path and turned to see David walking toward her. He was carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that grew in the countryside where he had grown up. This was so different from the expensive arrangements that filled the palace every day. "I thought you might like these," David said, sitting down beside her on the bench. "I picked them this morning from the field near my apartment." Camilla took the flowers and breathed in their fresh scent. "They're beautiful. Much better than all those formal roses I see every day." They talked quietly about their week, sharing stories and laughing at David's funny observations about the people he met while working. For these precious minutes, Camilla forgot about her royal duties and just enjoyed being with someone who made her feel happy and alive. But their peaceful moment was about to be shattered. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from behind the trees, or the small camera capturing every moment of their secret meeting. The palace guard who had been doing his routine patrol had stumbled upon something that would soon change everything. The guard stood frozen, not sure what to do with what he had just witnessed. His duty was to protect the royal family, but this situation was unlike anything he had been trained for. Should he report what he saw immediately, or should he wait and gather more information? As Camilla and David continued their conversation, completely unaware they were being watched, the guard made his decision. This was too important to ignore. He quietly backed away from his hiding spot and headed toward the palace, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just discovered. The secret that Camilla had worked so hard to protect was about to be exposed, and neither she nor David had any idea that their world was about to come crashing down around them. Guard Thompson had been working at the palace for 12 years, and in all that time he had never faced a situation like this. His hands were shaking as he walked back toward the main building, the images of what he had just seen playing over and over in his mind. He had always been taught that his job was to protect the royal family from any threats, but what happened when the threat came from within? What he had witnessed in the garden was not dangerous in a physical sense, but it could be devastating in ways that were much more complicated. Thompson stopped walking and leaned against a stone wall, trying to think clearly. He respected Camilla and had always found her to be kind and genuine during their brief interactions. She had never treated the palace staff badly, unlike some royals he had heard about from other guards. But his loyalty was to the institution, not to any individual person. The weight of this knowledge felt overwhelming. If he reported what he saw, he would be destroying someone's personal happiness. But if he stayed silent and the relationship was discovered later, he could lose his job and face serious consequences for not doing his duty. Meanwhile, back in the garden, Camilla and David had no idea their secret was in danger. They were holding hands and talking about David's latest photography assignment. He had been asked to cover a story about local communities helping homeless people, and his passion for the work made his eyes light up as he described it. "I love stories like this," David was saying. "It shows the best side of human nature, people helping each other without expecting anything in return." Camilla listened with genuine interest. This was what she loved most about David, his ability to find hope and goodness in ordinary situations. The royal world she lived in was often filled with politics and formal obligations, but David showed her a different perspective on life. "I wish I could do more meaningful work like that," Camilla said quietly. "Sometimes I feel like all my royal duties are just for show, just ceremonies and appearances that don't really help anyone." David squeezed her hand gently. "But you do help people. I've read about your charity work, the hospitals you visit, the organizations you support. That matters to real people, even if it doesn't always feel meaningful to you." As they continued talking, Guard Thompson finally made his decision. He could not carry this burden alone. He needed to speak with Captain Morrison, the head of palace security. Morrison had been at the palace even longer than Thompson and would know how to handle such a delicate situation. Thompson found Captain Morrison in his office, reviewing the duty schedules for the following week. Morrison looked up when Thompson knocked on the open door, immediately noticing the younger guard's nervous expression. "What's wrong, Thompson? You look like you've seen a ghost." Thompson closed the door behind him and sat down across from Morrison's desk. "Sir, I need to report something, but I'm not sure how to handle it." "It's complicated." Morrison set down his papers and gave Thompson his full attention. In all his years of service, he had learned that when a good guard like Thompson was this worried, it usually meant serious trouble. "Take your time and tell me everything," Morrison said calmly. Thompson took a deep breath and began to describe what he had witnessed in the garden. As he spoke, he watched Morrison's expression change from curiosity to concern, to something close to alarm. When Thompson finished his report, the office fell silent for several long minutes. Morrison rubbed his forehead, feeling the beginning of a headache. This was exactly the kind of situation that could destroy careers and damage the monarchy's reputation. But it was also a deeply personal matter involving someone's private life and feelings. "Are you absolutely certain about what you saw?" Morrison asked finally. "Yes, sir. There's no doubt." They were clearly very close, very comfortable with each other. This wasn't just a friendly conversation. Morrison stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the palace grounds. In the distance, he could see the area where Thompson had made his discovery. "How long do you think this has been going on?" "I don't know, sir. But from the way they acted together, it seemed like they've known each other well for some time." Morrison knew he had to make a decision quickly. The longer this situation continued without official knowledge, the worse it could become if it was eventually discovered by someone else. But he also knew that once he reported this up the chain of command, there would be no going back. "Thompson, I need you to write a detailed report of what you witnessed. Include everything, times, locations, descriptions, everything you can remember. But don't discuss this with anyone else until I decide how to proceed." "Yes, sir," Thompson replied, though he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. After Thompson left, Morrison sat alone in his office staring at the phone. He knew he should call his superiors immediately, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the memory of how happy Camilla had looked recently, or maybe it was his own understanding of how lonely life in the palace could be. But duty was duty, and Morrison had not spent 30 years in royal service by avoiding difficult decisions. He picked up the phone and began to dial, knowing that this call would set in motion events that would change many lives forever. The private secretary's office was usually a place of calm efficiency, but today the atmosphere was tense with urgency. Sir Richard Hartwell had been serving the royal family for over 20 years, and he had handled many crises during that time. However, the phone call he had just received from Captain Morrison had left him feeling deeply troubled. Sir Richard immediately called for an emergency meeting with the senior staff. Within an hour, the most trusted advisors were gathered in the secure conference room that was used only for the most sensitive matters. The room had no windows, and special equipment ensured that no conversations could be overheard from outside. Present at the meeting were Sir Richard himself, Captain Morrison, the Palace Press Secretary Mrs. Elizabeth Thornton, and the royal family's legal advisor, Mr. James Crawford. These 4 people had the responsibility of protecting the monarchy from any situation that could damage its reputation or stability. "Gentlemen, lady," Sir Richard began, his voice serious and formal, "we have a situation that requires immediate attention and absolute discretion. Captain Morrison will brief you on what has been discovered." Morrison stood and cleared his throat nervously. Even though he had reported many security issues over the years, this felt different. "This morning, one of my guards witnessed what appears to be a romantic meeting between a member of the royal family and an unknown civilian. The meeting took place in a secluded area of the palace grounds. Mrs. Thornton, who had spent years managing the public image of the royal family, immediately understood the implications. Do we know who this person is? Are they connected to the media in any way? According to our preliminary investigation, the man is David Harrison, a photographer who works for a small London newspaper called the Community Herald. He's 28 years old, unmarried, and has no criminal record or obvious connections to any major media organizations. Mr. Crawford, the legal advisor, was already thinking about the potential consequences. How long has this relationship been going on? And more importantly, how many people know about it? We believe only the guard who witnessed today's meeting knows about it so far, Morrison replied. But if they've been meeting regularly, it's possible others have seen them without understanding the significance. Sir Richard leaned forward in his chair. The question we must answer is how to handle this situation in a way that protects both the individual involved and the institution as a whole. Mrs. Thornton was already imagining the headlines if this story became public. If the newspapers get hold of this, they'll turn it into a scandal.
They'll investigate every detail of this man's life, follow both of them everywhere,
and create a media circus that could last for months. The room fell silent as everyone considered the complexity of the situation. They all understood that royal relationships were never just personal matters. Every romance, every friendship, every social connection was subject to public scrutiny and could affect the monarchy's reputation. What do we know about this David Harrison's character? Sir Richard asked. Is he the type of person who might try to profit from this relationship? Could he be seeking money or fame? Morrison consulted his notes. From what we've learned so far, he seems to be a decent person. He's been working at the same small newspaper for 3 years, lives in a modest apartment, and has no history of seeking publicity or selling stories. His colleagues describe him as professional and trustworthy. That's encouraging, Mr. Crawford said. But we have to consider all possibilities. Even if he has good intentions now, the pressure and temptation of media attention could change that quickly. Mrs. Thornton was thinking about the public relations aspect. We also need to consider the timing. If this relationship has been developing for months without anyone knowing, it suggests they've both been very careful about discretion. That's a positive sign. Sir Richard had been listening carefully to all perspectives, and now he needed to make some difficult decisions. Our first priority must be to gather more information. We need to understand the full scope of this relationship before we can determine the best course of action. Should we approach the individuals directly? Morrison asked. Not yet, Sir Richard replied firmly. If we reveal that we know about their relationship, it could panic them into making rash decisions. David Harrison might go to the newspapers, or they might try to run away together. Either scenario could create a much bigger problem. Mr. Crawford nodded in agreement. We need to investigate discreetly. Find out everything we can about David Harrison, his background, his motivations, his financial situation, his family. We also need to determine exactly how serious this relationship is. I can handle the background investigation, Morrison said. My team can gather information without raising suspicions. Mrs. Thornton was already planning how to manage the situation if it became public. We should also prepare several different response strategies, depending on how this develops. If the story breaks, we need to be ready with a coordinated response. Sir Richard stood up, signaling that the meeting was coming to an end. This information must not leave this room. We're dealing with people's lives and emotions, not just institutional concerns. Whatever we decide to do, we must handle it with wisdom and compassion. As the advisors left the conference room, each of them felt the weight of the secret they now carried. They had been entrusted with information that could destroy reputations, end careers, and break hearts. The decisions they made in the coming days would affect not only the people directly involved, but potentially the future of the monarchy itself. Meanwhile, Camilla and David remained completely unaware that their private world was being discussed and analyzed by some of the most powerful people in the palace. They continued to believe that their secret was safe, not knowing that their next meeting might be their last moment of peace before everything changed forever. David Harrison was editing photos at his small desk in the Community Herald newsroom when his editor, Sarah Miller, approached with a curious expression. She had been watching him work for the past few weeks and noticed something different about him. He seemed happier, more energetic, and there was a lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. "You're in a good mood lately," Sarah commented, sitting on the edge of his desk. "Did you win the lottery or find a new girlfriend?" David's face reddened slightly and he tried to focus on his computer screen. "Just been getting some good assignments lately. That homeless shelter story really inspired me." Sarah studied his reaction carefully. She had been a journalist for 15 years and had developed a strong instinct for when people were hiding something. David's nervous laugh and the way he avoided eye contact told her there was more to his good mood than work satisfaction. "Come on, David. I've known you for 3 years. You're practically glowing these days." "There's definitely a woman involved." David saved his work and turned to face his editor. He trusted Sarah, but he also knew that what he was hiding was far too dangerous to share with anyone, especially someone in the news business. "Okay, yes, I've been seeing someone," he admitted carefully, "but it's new, and I don't want to jinx it by talking about it too much." "Fair enough," Sarah said, though her journalistic curiosity was far from satisfied. "Just make sure this mystery woman isn't affecting your work. Though honestly, if she's making you this happy, I'd like to meet her." What David didn't know was that at that very moment, investigators hired by the palace were already learning everything there was to know about his life. They had spoken with his landlord, his university friends, and even his former teachers. The picture they were building showed a man of good character, but they needed to understand his relationship with Camilla completely. At the palace, Camilla was going through her daily routine of meetings and appearances, but her mind kept wandering to David. They had planned to meet again in 2 days, and she was already counting the hours. The formal dinner she was attending that evening felt meaningless compared to the simple conversations she shared with him in their secret garden. "You seem distracted tonight," commented Lady Patricia, an old family friend who was seated next to Camilla at the dinner table. "Is everything all right?" Camilla forced herself to focus on the conversation around her. "Just thinking about the charity work we discussed earlier. There's so much need, and sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough." Lady Patricia smiled approvingly. "That's what I've always admired about you, dear. You genuinely care about making a difference." If only she knew, Camilla thought to herself. If the truth about David came out, all her charity work and public service would be overshadowed by scandal. The thought made her stomach tighten with anxiety. Meanwhile, the palace investigation was uncovering more details about David's character. They learned that he had turned down several offers from larger newspapers because he preferred working on community stories that helped local people. He sent money to his elderly parents every month and volunteered at a children's photography workshop on weekends. Captain Morrison presented these findings to Sir Richard in a private meeting. "Everything we've discovered suggests that David Harrison is genuinely a good person. There's no evidence that he's seeking personal gain from this relationship." "That's reassuring," Sir Richard replied, "but it doesn't solve our fundamental problem. Good intentions don't change the fact that this relationship could become a public relations disaster." "There's something else," Morrison continued. "Our surveillance suggests that their relationship is quite serious. They've been meeting regularly for several months, and our body language experts believe they're genuinely in love, not just having a casual affair." This news made the situation even more complicated. A brief romance could be managed and quietly ended, but true love was much harder to control. People in love often made emotional decisions that ignored practical consequences. Sir Richard walked to his window and looked out at the gardens where Camilla and David had met just days before. Have we considered the possibility that this relationship might actually be beneficial in the long run? Morrison looked surprised. How do you mean, sir? Think about it. The public has always been critical of the royal family being out of touch with ordinary people. A relationship with someone like David Harrison, someone with a real job, who helps his community, who comes from a normal background, could actually improve public perception. But the initial scandal would be enormous, Morrison pointed out. The newspapers would tear them both apart before the public had a chance to see any positive aspects. Sir Richard nodded thoughtfully. That's true, which is why we need to think very carefully about timing and presentation. If this relationship is going to become public eventually, and most royal romances do, we need to control how that happens. The next morning, David received an unexpected phone call at work. The caller identified himself as a private investigator and said he was doing a routine background check for a potential client who was considering hiring David for a major photography project. The questions seemed innocent enough about his education, his work experience, his references, but something about the call made David uncomfortable. The investigator seemed more interested in his personal life and character than his professional qualifications. After hanging up, David sat at his desk, feeling uneasy. He had been so careful about keeping his relationship with Camilla secret, but what if someone was starting to suspect something? The thought of losing her made his chest tight with fear. That evening, Camilla called David from her private phone, something she only did when she was absolutely certain she wouldn't be overheard. I've been thinking about us a lot lately, she said quietly, about what we're doing and where this is going. David could hear the worry in her voice. Are you having second thoughts? No, never, Camilla replied quickly. But I'm scared, David. I'm scared that someone will find out and we'll lose each other. I'm scared that I'm being selfish by putting you at risk. David wished he could hold her hand through the phone. We knew this wouldn't be easy when we started. But what we have is real and that's worth fighting for. I love you, Camilla whispered, the words carrying all the weight of her fears and hopes. I love you too, David replied, and whatever happens, we'll face it together. Neither of them knew that their conversation was about to become irrelevant. The palace advisors had made their decision about how to handle the situation, and events were already in motion that would change their lives forever. The morning air was crisp as Camilla made her way to the secret garden, for what she hoped would be another peaceful meeting with David. She had been looking forward to this moment all week, planning to tell him about a charity project she wanted his help with. His photography skills could really make a difference in raising awareness for homeless families. As she rounded the corner near the greenhouse, her heart stopped. Instead of the empty path she expected, she saw several figures standing near their special bench. Sir Richard Hartwell was there, along with Captain Morrison and 2 other palace officials she recognized but didn't know well. Their serious expressions told her immediately that something was very wrong. Good morning, Sir Richard said formally as Camilla approached. His usual warm demeanor was replaced by an official coldness that made her stomach drop. I'm afraid we need to have a conversation with you. Camilla's mind raced as she tried to understand what was happening. How did they know about this place? How long had they been watching her? Most importantly, where was David? I don't understand, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. What's this about? Captain Morrison stepped forward with a tablet in his hands. We have documented evidence of your meetings with David Harrison in this location. We know about your relationship, and we need to discuss the implications. The words hit Camilla like a physical blow. Her legs felt weak, and she had to sit down on the bench where she and David had shared so many happy conversations. The place that had been their sanctuary now felt like a trap. How long have you known? She asked quietly. One of my guards witnessed your meeting 3 days ago, Morrison replied. Since then, we've been conducting a thorough investigation to understand the situation fully. Sir Richard sat down beside Camilla, his expression softening slightly. This isn't about punishment or judgment. We're here because we care about you and because we need to protect the institution. But mostly we need to find a solution that works for everyone. Camilla felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Where is David? Does he know you've found out? Mr. Harrison is currently in a meeting with some of our colleagues, Sir Richard said carefully. He's being treated with respect and courtesy, but he needed to understand the seriousness of the situation. Meanwhile, across London, David was sitting in a small office with two well-dressed people who had introduced themselves as royal advisors. He had been told that someone wanted to offer him a major photography assignment, but the conversation had quickly taken a very different direction. "Mr. Harrison," said the woman, "Mrs. Thornton, we know about your relationship with a member of the royal family. We're not here to threaten you or make accusations. We simply need to understand your intentions and discuss how to move forward." David felt like the world was spinning around him. His worst fears were coming true. Is she in trouble? Is this going to hurt her? The male advisor, Mr. Crawford, was impressed by David's first concern being for Camilla rather than himself. "That depends largely on how we handle this situation. We have several options, and your cooperation will be crucial in determining the best path forward." "What kind of options?" David asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Mrs. Thornton consulted her notes. "We could arrange for you to end the relationship quietly and discreetly. You would be compensated for any inconvenience, and we would help you advance your career in ways that would benefit everyone." David's face flushed with anger. "You want to pay me to leave her? You think our relationship is just about money?" "We had to explore that possibility," Mr. Crawford said calmly. "Many people have tried to take advantage of the royal family for financial gain, but your reaction suggests that's not your motivation." "Of course it's not," David said firmly. "I love her. I don't care about her title or her wealth. I care about who she is as a person." Back at the palace garden, Camilla was having a similar conversation. Sir Richard was explaining the various ways the situation could be handled, but she was barely listening. All she could think about was David and whether he was safe. "You have to understand," Sir Richard was saying, "if this relationship becomes public without proper management, it will create a media frenzy that could damage both of you permanently. The newspapers will investigate every detail of Mr. Harrison's life. They'll follow you both everywhere, and they'll turn your love story into a soap opera for public entertainment." "So what are you suggesting?" Camilla asked, wiping away tears. Captain Morrison cleared his throat. "We've identified 3 possible approaches. First, we could help you end the relationship quietly and ensure Mr. Harrison's privacy is protected. Second, we could work with you to gradually introduce him to royal life and prepare for an eventual public announcement. Or third, we could help you both start new lives away from the public eye." The third option caught Camilla's attention. "What do you mean by new lives?" "We could arrange for you to step back from your royal duties and live as private citizens," Sir Richard explained. "Mr. Harrison could receive opportunities that would allow him to support you both comfortably, and you could be together without the pressures of royal life." Camilla stared at the flowers that David had brought her just a few days ago. They were still sitting on the bench, now wilted and brown. It seemed like a symbol of what was happening to their relationship. "I need to talk to David," she said finally. "I need to know what he wants to do." "This decision affects both of us," Sir Richard nodded. "We can arrange that. But understand that whatever you both decide, there's no going back to the way things were. Too many people know about this now. The secret is out, and we have to deal with the consequences." As Camilla looked around the garden where she had been so happy, she realized that her life was about to change completely. Whether she chose love or duty, she would have to give up something precious. The only question was whether she would make that choice with David by her side or if the palace would make the decision for them. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders as she prepared to face the most important decision of her life. Everything she had known, everything she had planned, was about to be different forever. The private meeting room at the palace had never felt so heavy with emotion. Camilla and David sat side by side on a small sofa, holding hands tightly while Sir Richard and Mrs. Thornton sat across from them. The past hour had been filled with difficult conversations, tears, and moments of silence as they all tried to process the magnitude of the situation. David looked exhausted. The weight of discovering that his private life was being watched and analyzed by palace officials had shaken him deeply. But seeing Camilla's red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands made him angry at the people who had put her through this ordeal. "I want to make something very clear," David said, his voice steady despite his emotions. "Whatever happens, I don't want anyone to think that Camilla did anything wrong. She's the most honest, caring person I've ever met. If anyone should be blamed for this situation, it should be me." Sir Richard was touched by David's protectiveness, but he needed to keep the conversation focused on practical solutions. "Mr. Harrison, no one is assigning blame here. What we need now is a decision about how to move forward." Camilla had been quiet for most of the meeting, but now she looked up at the advisors with determination in her eyes. "Before we make any decisions, I want to know exactly what each option means. I want to understand every consequence, every sacrifice, and every possibility." Mrs. Thornton opened her folder and began to explain in detail. "If you choose to end the relationship, we can ensure that Mr. Harrison is protected from media attention. He can continue his career without interference, and you can continue your royal duties. The public will never know this relationship existed." "And if we choose to be together publicly?" Camilla asked. "That would require a very careful approach," Sir Richard replied. "We would need to prepare the public gradually, perhaps starting with Mr. Harrison attending some charity events as a photographer. We'd build a narrative about how you met through your mutual interest in helping communities. It would take months, possibly years, before you could be open about your relationship." David shook his head. "That sounds like we'd be living a lie for years, pretending we're just friends when we're actually in love." "The third option is complete privacy," Mrs. Thornton continued. "You could both step away from public life entirely. We would help you establish new identities and careers away from London, possibly in another country. You could be together freely, but you would have to give up everything you've known." Camilla felt overwhelmed by the choices. Each option required enormous sacrifices, and none of them felt like a real solution. "How long do we have to decide?" "Unfortunately, not long," Sir Richard said regretfully. "We've managed to keep this quiet so far, but we can't control information forever. Someone could leak the story to the newspapers at any time." David squeezed Camilla's hand and turned to face her. "What do you want to do? What would make you happy?" "I want to be with you," Camilla said simply. "But I also don't want to destroy your life or put you through the nightmare of media attention." "Let me worry about my own life," David replied with a small smile.
"I knew from the beginning that loving you would be complicated."
"But I've never regretted it, not for a single moment." Sir Richard watched the couple's interaction and found himself moved by their obvious devotion to each other. In all his years of managing royal relationships, he had rarely seen such genuine love and mutual respect. "There might be a fourth option," he said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "What if we controlled the story from the beginning? What if we announced your relationship on our terms, with a narrative that the public could understand and support?" Mrs. Thornton looked surprised. "That's very risky, Sir Richard. The media reaction could be unpredictable, but it would be honest," Sir Richard replied. "We could present David as exactly what he is, a hardworking, community-minded photographer who fell in love with someone who shares his values. We could emphasize how his background represents the people the royal family serves." David was intrigued despite his nervousness. "What would that mean for us day to day?" "It would mean facing the public together from the start," Sir Richard explained. "There would be intense media attention initially, but if you handled it well, the public might actually embrace your relationship. People love authentic love stories." Camilla felt a spark of hope for the first time since this ordeal began. "Could it really work?" "There are no guarantees," Mrs. Thornton admitted. "But if you're both committed to each other and willing to face the challenges together, it's possible." The room fell silent as Camilla and David considered this unexpected possibility. They could actually be together openly, without hiding or pretending or running away, but they would have to be strong enough to face whatever criticism and scrutiny came their way. "I need to ask you something honestly," David said to Camilla. "Are you sure you want this? Are you sure I'm worth giving up your privacy and dealing with all the complications this will bring?" Camilla looked into his eyes and saw all the love, fear, and hope that she felt in her own heart. "David, you've shown me what it means to love someone for who they really are, not for what they represent or what they can give you. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible, so yes, you're worth it." David brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Then let's face whatever comes next together." Sir Richard felt a mixture of admiration and concern as he watched the couple make their decision. "If you're certain about this, we need to start planning immediately. Once we announce your relationship, there's no going back." "We understand," Camilla said firmly. "We want to be honest about our feelings and we want to face the future together." As the meeting ended and plans began to form, Neither Camilla nor David could have imagined how dramatically their announcement would change not only their own lives, but also the public's perception of the royal family itself. Their love story was about to become one of the most talked-about romances in royal history. The morning of the announcement arrived with gray skies and nervous energy throughout the palace. Camilla stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting her simple blue dress for the third time. She had chosen this outfit carefully, elegant enough for a royal appearance but modest enough to show that she understood the seriousness of the moment. David was getting ready in a guest room down the hall, struggling with his tie. He had never worn such formal clothes before, and everything felt strange and uncomfortable. But when Sir Richard had explained the importance of their first public appearance together, David understood that every detail mattered. The past week had been a whirlwind of preparation. Media specialists had coached them on how to handle interviews, legal advisors had explained the protocols they would need to follow, and palace staff had arranged every aspect of their public debut. But despite all the planning, both Camilla and David felt terrified about what was about to happen. "Are you ready for this?" Camilla asked when David knocked on her door. He smiled and took her hand. As ready as anyone can be to have their private life become front-page news around the world. They walked together to Sir Richard's office, where the final preparations were being made. The official statement had been written and reviewed dozens of times. It would be released to all major news outlets simultaneously at exactly noon, followed by a brief appearance from the couple on the palace steps. Mrs. Thornton was coordinating with journalists, making sure they understood the ground rules for coverage. "Remember," she told Camilla and David, "you'll make a short statement together, answer 3 pre-approved questions, and then leave. Don't get drawn into discussions about details or future plans." "What if they ask about how we met?" David asked nervously. "Stick to the truth," Sir Richard advised. "You met at a charity event, discovered your shared interest, and developed a friendship that grew into love. It's a perfectly normal story that happens to involve extraordinary circumstances." At 11:45 a.m., the palace released the statement to the media. "We are pleased to announce the relationship between Camilla and Mr. David Harrison, a photographer and community advocate from London. Their relationship developed through their shared commitment to charitable work and community service. We ask for privacy and respect as they navigate this new chapter together." The reaction was immediate and explosive. News channels interrupted their regular programming, social media erupted with discussions and debates, and photographers began gathering outside the palace gates. The story was spreading around the world within minutes. Standing behind the palace doors, Camilla and David could hear the growing crowd of journalists and onlookers outside. The noise was overwhelming. Cameras clicking, reporters shouting questions, and the general buzz of excitement that comes with major news. "Second thoughts?" David asked quietly. "Every few minutes," Camilla admitted with a nervous laugh. "But I'd rather face this with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have had together." At exactly 12:30 p.m., the palace doors opened and Camilla and David stepped out into the afternoon light. The noise from the crowd was deafening, with camera flashes creating a constant strobe effect that made it hard to see clearly. They walked hand in hand to the microphones that had been set up on the steps. Camilla took a deep breath and began to speak. "Thank you all for coming today. I want to introduce you to someone very special to me. David Harrison is a photographer who has spent his career documenting the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in their communities. He has shown me a perspective on service and compassion that has enriched my own understanding of how we can help others." David stepped closer to the microphones, his voice slightly shaky but determined. "I never expected to fall in love with someone whose life is so different from mine. But I've learned that when you find someone who shares your values and makes you want to be a better person, those differences don't matter as much as what you have in common." The first question came from a reporter in the front row. "How long have you been together?" "We've known each other for 8 months," Camilla replied. "Our relationship developed gradually as we got to know each other as friends first. Mr. Harrison, how do you plan to handle the public attention that comes with this relationship?" David looked directly into the cameras. "I hope people will judge me by my actions and character rather than making assumptions. I'm committed to supporting the charitable work that brought us together and to earning the respect of the public through my behavior." The final question was directed at both of them. What message do you want to send to young people about love and relationships? Camilla and David looked at each other before she answered. We want young people to know that real love is based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine friendship. It's not about titles or status or what someone can give you materially. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself. As they finished their statement and walked back into the palace, the couple felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had taken the first step into their new public life, but they knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. Over the following weeks, the public reaction surprised everyone. While there was initial skepticism and criticism from some quarters, many people were charmed by the genuine affection between Camilla and David. His background as a community photographer resonated with ordinary citizens who felt he represented their values and experiences. David's newspaper, the Community Herald, saw a massive increase in readership as people wanted to see the work that had originally caught Camilla's attention. His photographs of local heroes and community projects became symbols of the kind of authentic public service that many felt the royal family should represent. 6 months later, as Camilla and David walked through the same garden where their secret had been discovered, they reflected on how much their lives had changed. They still faced challenges and criticism, but they had each other and the support of a public that had grown to appreciate their honest, down-to-earth approach to their relationship. Do you ever regret that we couldn't just be a normal couple? Camilla asked as they sat on their special bench. David picked a wildflower and handed it to her, just as he had done in those early secret meetings. Every love story has its challenges. Ours just happened to be more public than most. But I wouldn't change anything if it meant losing what we have together. Their love had not only survived the scandal of discovery, but had actually helped modernize public perceptions of the royal family. They had proven that authentic relationships based on genuine affection and shared values could bridge any gap between different worlds. And in doing so, they had given hope to countless other couples who believed that love could overcome any obstacle. The palace guard who had first discovered their secret, meeting later, said that witnessing their relationship had restored his faith in the power of true love. What had begun as a potential crisis had become a story of courage, authenticity, and the triumph of genuine emotion over institutional expectations.